It feels like just yesterday, J.R. Smith was playing a vital role in one of the craziest playoff runs we've ever seen. In the 2016 playoffs, he was shooting 43% from 3. His ability to catch fire in an instant was an X factor, but what happened to him? J.R. Smith grew up in New Jersey and during high school was highly recruited in both football and basketball. He also played baseball. When it became clear he might have a real shot at the NBA, he narrowed his focus to basketball, and as a senior, he was a top player in the country. He signed on to go to the University of North Carolina, but eventually decided to decommit and go straight to the NBA out of high school. A decision that made a lot of sense considering his senior season was really his 5th year as he repeated a grade as a freshman. Smith went into the draft process projected to be a first-round pick, standing at 6'6" with insane leaping ability. There was a lot of teams excited about his upside. His NBA career would begin when the New Orleans Hornets grabbed him with the 18th pick in the 2004 NBA draft. To start things off, it wasn't great. As a rookie, he would start in 56 games, had a pretty big role, but averaged 10 points, shooting just 39% from the field and 29% from 3. His work ethic early on really hurt his relationship with at the time head coach Byron Scott. He would go into his second season as a starting shooting guard, but by the end of the year, he was out of the rotation. Following that season, he'd be traded to Chicago and then traded again 6 days later to the Denver Nuggets. This is where Smith would really start to become known and eventually find his place as one of the best sixth men. He would average 14 points as a 40% three-point shooter in his first season. At the beginning of his time in Denver, he got the chance to play alongside both an emerging star in Carmelo Anthony and an NBA legend in Allen Iverson. He played 5 seasons there, averaging 14 points consistently in the running for the Sixth Man of the Year. Following the NBA lockout, Smith decided to join Carmelo Anthony on the New York Knicks. In his second season there, he would have the best year of his career, winning Sixth Man, averaging 18 points, 5 rebounds, and 5 assists, shooting 36% from 3. At this point, he was a fan favorite with his score-first mentality and consistent, jaw-dropping highlights. In the 2014 season, the Cavaliers decided to bring in some more help after acquiring both Kevin Love and LeBron James in the offseason, and midway through the year, made a deal with the Knicks to get both J.R. Smith and Amon Shumpert. We saw Smith on some decent Denver teams. The Knicks were never as good as many hoped in his time there, so it was exciting to see him go to a team that was truly a championship contender. He had a solid first season. During the playoffs, he was dependent on a lot with the injuries of both Kyrie and Love, and while he played solid individually, the injuries really held back their chances in the finals. In the 2016 season, he was huge for this roster. He was their starting shooting guard, and in the regular season was averaging 12 points, shooting 40% from 3. At this time in his career, he was already in his 30s. He wasn't the high flyer we had come to know, but his ability to make tough shots on a consistent basis was one of the key factors in the Cavaliers being able to make this historic playoff run that featured a 3-1 comeback against the 73-9 Golden State Warriors. Following that season, LeBron advocated for Smith's return, and Smith and the Cavs eventually agreed to a 4-year, $57 million contract. In the first season of that deal, his numbers started to slip, and the Cavs would eventually fall short in the finals. In LeBron's final season, the 2018 season, Smith was now averaging 8 points a game, and this team would again make it to the NBA Finals, and in the very first game against the Warriors, Smith would become a part of one of the most memorable plays in NBA history. The game was tied with 2.2 seconds left on the clock. George Hill had a chance to take the lead at the free throw line. He would end up missing the shot, but luckily, J.R. Smith grabs the offensive rebound. He has a chance to put up a high percentage putback to seal the game and give the Cavs a win advantage in the series. Instead, unaware of the score, thinking the Cavs had the lead, after grabbing the rebound, he dribbled the ball out to the three-point line as time expires. It's safe to say LeBron wasn't excited about this situation, and that's where we got this beautiful picture. The Cavs would lose that game in overtime and eventually the whole series in a 4-0 fashion. That offseason, LeBron took his talents to Los Angeles. At the start of the 2019 season, Smith had a much more reduced role, and after the team started 2-13, he raised concerns that they weren't trying to win and said their goal was just to develop young players. The next day, the Cavs released a statement saying that JR will no longer be with the team as the organization works with JR and his representation regarding his future. In that offseason, the Cavs would waive him, and he failed to get a new contract in free agency. For most of this past year, it didn't look like Smith was gonna get another chance, but when Avery Bradley didn't join the Lakers in the Orlando bubble. Due to some family reasons, the Lakers decided to sign Smith as a replacement player. Most believed this opportunity was given to Smith just due to his relationship with LeBron James. But Smith doesn't necessarily feel the same way, as he said, "For the people who believe that I've been given a second chance or I got an opportunity from another player or because I'm friends with somebody, this person or that person, nah. Whether that happened or not, when I got there, I showed up to stay there. I've been fortunate and blessed to play with great players. For a lot of people, they look at my career as a joke, and that's something I take personal." In the few regular season games in the bubble, Smith got some decent run, but it wasn't great. He was averaging 3 points, shooting 32% from the field, and 9% from 3. At that point, it was clear there just wasn't going to be much of a role for him in the playoffs, and that was the case. He would only play in about half the games, and when he did, it was for just an average of 7 minutes, where his offensive struggles prevailed. The Lakers would eventually win the championship, giving Smith his second ring in his career, but this one was much different than the first. Referring to the latest title, he said, "It's fulfilling for me because it's totally different. I was playing more during the first one and felt like I had a very important role in that game. In this situation, going through the playoffs and not really playing and trying to find my niche as a leader, as a veteran, trying to help the younger guys out in more of a coaching aspect. It was one of the hardest things I really ever had to do. I see a lot of people say, you didn't earn it. I felt that I earned everything I ever got. I feel I put my blood, sweat, and tears into my craft, into every opportunity that was presented to me. Regardless of who can vouch for you or whatever, you still have to walk through that door and put in the work." Now, if this is the end of J.R. Smith's career, that's fine. He's played 16 seasons. He's now 35 years old. As we talked about in the last video, there's very few players that are able to make it to that age and remain a productive player. But I still think there's a chance he can get a shot. I don't think his hot hand ability has gone anywhere. I think there's some contenders that might take the risk as their 13th man, and I think at the least, J.R. Smith can bring value in the leadership department. We just talked about his struggles in that role a season ago, but with the experience now under his belt and all the experience in his career, he can bring value. Now, the odds are pretty low. I think the most realistic scenario would be something similar to last season, where he's brought in due to injuries, really just as a last resort, where he wouldn't be expected to see much time on the court, a role that he might not even take. J.R. Smith is a player I'm always going to have positive memories of. For years, he's been one of my favorite players to use in 2K. If you've ever played 2K, you know most of the time the key attributes are dunking, athleticism, and three-point shooting. Things that Smith has always been strong in, and his jumper is just so easy to nail. I don't think I'll ever forget the memes that have come out of his career, whether that's him forgetting the situation at the end of a key game or just being the Henny God. I'm excited to see what's next for him. In the process of finding Smith's opinion on the Lakers, I stumbled across a pretty interesting question, and that's who would win in a head-to-head matchup. The 2016 Cavs, who he won his first title with, or the 2020 Lakers, who he won his second title with. He gave his opinion saying, "I think the size the Lakers have, we just didn't have in Cleveland. In Cleveland, we were much more grittier, we played a little harder, we were much more nastier defensively, but the size with this Lakers team, with Anthony Davis and Dwight Howard, and being able to change the lineups with Markieff Morris, we just weren't that versatile. We could play multiple different ways in LA, but in Cleveland, we only had one way to play." I'm curious to hear your opinion on this one, but I think I'm gonna have to agree with Smith. I think he's got a pretty good idea of their strengths and weaknesses as well. He played on the teams.